Dang, now he's kind of like raised the bar and made it like I got a promise. I got to actually meet the promise. I got to teach visually. Dang. I know my volume's a little bit down below, but you guys catch up with me. All right, let's get after this. My name is Jim Wallace. I've been working in Los Angeles County for about 30 years. Most of that time I was not a Christian. Didn't believe any of this stuff was true. I thought you guys were all silly, although I didn't really know a lot of Christians because our community is so large that you wouldn't necessarily bump into another Christian unless you made an effort to do that. So I was raised in an area where I didn't have any friends growing up that were Christians. Now, most of my work in the years in which I worked in law enforcement was working cold case homicides. So these are just unsolved murders because there's no statute of limitations on a murder. Does that make sense? So if you do a robbery after a certain number of years, that will expire and I can't come after you. But on murders, these don't expire. So a lot of my cases, the vast majority, ended up on Dateline. I think I've been on Dateline more than anybody else in the country. And these are just cases that just didn't get solved because the first investigators were missing a piece of information. Until about 2 weeks ago, I had never solved a case using DNA. And I want to help you see how the skill set you could use as a detective could actually help you determine if Christianity is true and why that would matter. So what we're going to do tonight and tomorrow is we're going to take a look at the case for your worldview if you are a Christian. And you might be thinking, well, I don't even care to prove this evidentially. I'm already a Christian. Really? Do you have young people in your family? We are hemorrhaging as a church right now, and I think you know that. Most young people are walking away from the church because they see all the noise, they hear the noise, and they see so many other options that seem equally legitimate because they all have that glowing rectangle in their hands, right? That thing we call social media, the thing we call the internet. My son was raised in the church because I became a Christian when he was about 6. So he is now working in the same agency that I was working in before. We are not creative people. His name is Jim Wallace, just like me, okay? We just use the same name over and over and over again. As a matter of fact, I was Jimmy until this kid was born, and then I lost my name to him. He now, on his name tag, I gave him mine, but he wears one that says Jimmy Wallace on the name tag. I thought, what does a cop, the name Jimmy, doesn't that sound like it's a kid's name, right? But there's a lot of Jimmys in our agency, and he's just one of them. I worked for 25 years at the same agency before him, using the same tools with the same name tag, except mine said Jim. And I got that idea from somebody I knew, my dad, who wore the same name tag before me at the same agency. His name is also Jim Wallace. Well, I always say we're like the George Foreman of law enforcement, okay? You guys know George Foreman's got 6 kids, right? And 6 boys, all of whom are named George Foreman. That's right. So we're trying to do the same thing. We've been at the same agency for the last 58 years. If you called our agency and asked for Jim Wallace, there's been somebody there to answer the phone. Now, you learn a lot doing this, and I learned a lot of how I work cases. A lot of it was driven by what I learned from my dad. And I know that Jimmy is working cases largely. Our careers kind of repeat the same patterns. And so now he's in a position where he'll call me at night and say, hey, we're doing this. And I'll say, okay, I remember when I did that. Here's how I did it. And so we're passing this on generationally. And that's what I want to pass on to you in the next 2 days, today and tomorrow morning, okay? Some of the tools that you can use, because I was asked a couple of years ago, and that's how I actually met your compadres in Arkansas at Fellowship Bible Church in Arkansas in Little Rock, because I was there filming a movie called God's Not Dead 2. And I was asked to just do a scene in this movie for 6 minutes describing why you could trust the New Testament Gospels. Was there any good reason to trust them evidentially? Like this is how I became a Christian. I became a Christian by examining the Gospels. I was challenged to do that. And that's what I did, and I actually believe they are reliable accounts from the first century. We're going to talk about that. But what if instead of doing any of this tonight, I just decided to take you downtown, let's say Memphis or whatever city you want to go to, Nashville, you name it, and we decided to go downtown, and I said, instead of doing a talk for 5 talks, whatever we're going to be doing here, I'm instead going to take you to the streets of, say, Memphis, and we are going to share the truth with people who have never heard the truth before? How many of you have been involved in like one-day missions trips where you might preach the gospel? Raise your hand if you've done that. Okay, if I said, you know what, we're just going to stop this right now. We're going to get in cars. We're going to drive to Memphis. We're going to share the truth on the streets of Memphis with people who have never heard the truth. Would any of you be willing to go with me? How many of you would go? Raise your hand. Okay, you're in church. You're in church. Why would you not go with me? You either go with me or you will go to hell. That's the only two choices you have. Okay, so you would go with me on this one-day trip. By the way, it's important to know truth, because if there's no truth, then there's no truth about God. So before we talk about evidence for God's existence, we got to lock this thing down. Is there a good reason to believe there are objective truth claims? Now, if I told you the truth we're going to share on the streets of Memphis is the truth about your favorite dessert, how many of you would be willing to go on that trip? Why are you laughing? That's like a stupid trip, right? By the way, we had dinner before we came in here. That's right. Your pastor treated us to a dinner. And we had the most amazing, I don't know what it was, but it was some kind of strawberry vanilla pudding thing. I'm not sure what it was. But man, it was really good. But if I asked you, you all have your favorite dessert? What is your in Pennsylvania, I was in Pennsylvania one year, and we were talking about this issue, and their favorite dessert in Pennsylvania is something called, in Philadelphia, is something called shoe fly pie. Have you ever heard of that? Was that a disgusting name for a dessert? Right, like you're thinking to yourself, that's disgusting, right? Shoe fly pie. But you have a favorite dessert right here in Jackson, Tennessee. What is your favorite dessert? Just yell it out. Caramel what? Caramel meringue pie. Wow, that sounds pretty good. But you're wrong. It's not the best dessert. The best dessert, in my opinion, of course, is chocolate chip cookies. You can get these in any airport. I travel a lot. I will not be able to find caramel meringue pie in an airport. But I will be able to find a chocolate chip cookie. Now, I think you know that if I was to tell you we're going to go to downtown Memphis and share the truth, and my claim is going to be that chocolate chip cookies are the best dessert in the world, none of you are going to want to go on that trip, because that's a stupid trip. And the reason why you think it's stupid is because that, you clearly see, is a matter of personal opinion. How much time are you going to spend wrestling with people on the street about your personal opinions? And why we call it a personal opinion, what I mean is I, as the person who holds this truth, I get to decide if that claim is true. In other words, I, as the subject, get to decide if that claim is true. And that's why we call these kinds of truths subjective truth claims. They are grounded in the personal opinions of subjects. Are we clear on this? I'm going to test you. I have a test waiting for you right now. I do it all over the country. People get about 4 questions in and they start choking, okay? I don't want you to choke. So pay attention, okay? Subjective claim. Now, let's say I was going to take you downtown tomorrow, and instead of meeting here, we're going to go downtown and we're going to share the truth on the street about the cure for tuberculosis. You know, in Southern California, there's a rash, an outbreak of TB. I have TB. I caught TB from a guy I arrested. I was about 42 years old when I arrested this guy. He had TB. I didn't know he had it. Now I'm TB positive. But I'm not TB active. At least I hope so for all the people in the front row. Because if I'm TB active, we got a problem, right? As a matter of fact, they won't even treat TB positive people who are past the age of 40. It's too destructive. So until I go active, and I'm not going to go active, they're not going to treat me. Does that make sense? Now, if I told you we were going to go downtown to share the truth about the cure for TB, I think most of you would want to go. This is a different kind of claim. What if there are people downtown who don't even know that they have TB? They think they have a flu. It presents like a cough. So they don't even know they're dying, and their kids are dying with them. All we have to do is go and share the cure with them. I think you'd be willing to go on that kind of a trip. By the way, the cure is grounded in an antibiotic cocktail. 3 key antibiotics. The most important one is isoniazid. If you don't have isoniazid, you don't get cured of TB.
Now, this is different than your preference in desserts. This is not a matter of personal opinion. This is the cure for TB for everyone, regardless of what your opinion is. You might have an opinion that something else could cure you, aspirin. That's not going to work. Your opinion cannot make aspirin work as the cure. This is grounded not in your subjective opinion. It's grounded in the object known as isoniazid. If isoniazid is not the cure, this is not a true claim. This is why we call these kinds of claims objective truth claims. They are not grounded in subjects, they are grounded in objects. Does that make sense so far? I'm going to test you to see if you know the difference between objective and subjective claims. Why is this important? Because think about it. How many of you see yourself as the next Billy Graham? You're constantly reaching out to the next generation and talking to them about the gospel. To your neighbors. You can't go into a market and stand in line without talking to somebody about the gospel. You can't sit waiting for a restaurant table without talking to somebody about the gospel. How many of you see yourselves as that kind of Christian? Raise your hand. Really? There's no one in this room who's sharing? Why aren't we doing that, by the way? Well, is it possible that we're not sharing that because we see the cross, we see the gospel as really a matter of personal opinion? You know, you got neighbors, they're good people, they're Mormons, they got a great church they go to, and they certainly behave really well, they're sweet people. Why would you go over there and shake that tree? What's the point of that? Really? So do you think that your view of God is simply a matter of personal opinion? They've got a view, you've got a view, you like cookies, they like caramel meringue pie. So why would I go over there and try to mess with them? Is it possible that we are treating the gospel like a cookie instead of a cure? I think we are, a lot of times, because we have not grabbed onto the distinction between subjective claims and objective claims. So that's why I want to start right here before we talk about any of the evidence for God. I'm going to test you, but I want to first just run by you the difference one more time so you're ready for the test. This, I'm going to show you right now what I think is one of the nicest cars I have ever owned. I just want you to see it's beautiful. It is the 2004 Hyundai Sonata. Now, is that a beautiful car? Why are you all so quiet? You realize that, and I don't know how many here in this room are going to be able to drive a car for the first time this year? You're like 15 and a half, you're 15, you're going to be 16 driving a car this year. Raise your hand. Nobody, huh? You know, in my family, if you were 15 and a half and you're about to drive a car, you know what car you're going to get to drive? Whatever old car we happen to own. Okay, because if I'm buying a new car, it ain't going to be for you, okay? It's going to be for me. You're getting my old car. And my daughter realized this when she looked out in the driveway and she saw that car, and she was about turning age to be 16. And she said to me, "Is that going to be my car to drive?" I said, "Yes, it is." She said, "I can't drive that car." I said, "Why not?" She says, "That's an old man car." I said, "What makes that an old man? Is it because it's a four-door? Is that what makes that an old man car?" She says, "No, it's just really ugly." I said, "Are you kidding me? I'll make a claim and you tell me, is this subjective or objective?" Here's the claim. Hyundai automobiles are the coolest cars in the world. Subjective or objective? Yeah, clearly it's my opinion, but my daughter didn't share my opinion. Now, can you think, I've told you the difference between objective claims and subjective claims. So I want you to think of a scenario. Just imagine a scenario. Can you imagine a scenario where this could be an objective claim, not a subjective claim? Can you imagine a scenario, a way the world could be, where this would be an objective claim? Raise your hand if you can think of one. Go. If the gas mileage was better? But then it would be a matter of, well, is it cool to have good gas mileage or not? That'd be a matter of opinion, wouldn't it?
Well, that would be subjective.
That would be subjective. I think that's close. I think that's really close. Go ahead. What's yours? If they're the only cars in the world. Yeah, it's true. If these are the only cars in the world, these are both the coolest and the lamest cars at the same time, right? Because they're the only cars in the world. Can you think of another scenario? Another scenario. Come on, think about it. What if I go?
Probably a survey that said 75% of the people in the...
Oh, okay. If a survey said that 75% of all people thought that Hyundais were cool cars, but that would still be subjective in the sense it would just be a group of subjects who make the claim, that's still even cultural consensus is still subjective. One last one, go.
You drop it off in Antarctica.
You drop it off in Antarctica. I think that's the closest way. How about this? Let's take all cars manufactured in the United States, bring them into garages. We will test all of their air conditioning. We find out, testing all the air conditioning on every possible manufacturer of car, that Hyundai automobiles are 2 degrees colder by way of air conditioning than any other car manufactured. Now we could say objectively that Hyundais are the coolest cars in the world. Okay, you see the difference, right? Okay. So one way to tell if a claim is subjective is simply to ask the question, can your opinion make it so? Or keep it from being so? That's one way to tell the difference. I'm going to show you how committed I am to Hyundais. We have owned 7. When my son Jimmy was going to college, he needed a car. What do you think he got? A Hyundai Accent. He still owns this car. He's been out of college for 8 years. Might be time for a new car, I think, but no, he's still on. He likes his old car. This is back when he had long hair. He was a hippie freak back in those days before he became a police officer. My son David is an anesthesiologist, but when he went to med school, he needed a car. And what do you think he got? He got himself a Hyundai Elantra. There it is. And that's his picture. The only person in my family who does not drive a Hyundai when we had everyone living at home was my German wife, who drives a Volkswagen Beetle. That's it. It's got to be a German car. All right, so let me make another claim, and you tell me if this is objective or subjective. Here it is, related to Hyundais. Is this an objective or subjective claim? Hyundai automobiles can fly you to the moon. Objective or subjective? Just yell it out. Objective or subjective? Okay, 4 people yelled it out. Can you guys do a little better than that? Objective or subjective? Yeah, kind of harder, isn't it? I'm not asking if it's true or false. That's a different issue. So remember, one way to determine the difference is, can my opinion make it so or keep it from being so? Can my opinion make Hyundai automobiles fly to the moon? No. Could it keep them from flying to the moon if they could? No. This is grounded in the object known as a Hyundai automobile. And it is false. They cannot, so there are such things as false objective claims. You just learned a second way to tell the difference. If it can be falsified or verified, if I can prove you wrong, it's an objective claim. So in other words, if you said, my favorite dessert is caramel meringue pie, and I said, no, it isn't. You're like, no, it is. No, it isn't. Yeah, she gets to decide if that's the truth, right? I cannot falsify her claim. She's the one who gets to decide. If you can falsify it, it's because it's an objective claim grounded in an object. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to give you the 4 rules I just taught you before we start the test, okay? And we're going to see how far you get on the test. Here are the 4 rules. First rule when it comes to truth claims. Number 1, subjective claims are changeable. They can be changed by simply changing your opinion. You can say one day this is the best dessert, next day you can change your mind. You get to change the claim. Make sense? Rule number 2, objective claims can be verified or falsified. If I said to you, you know, I've got money in my pockets, you can say empty your pockets. Let me see. Because you can actually look at that objective claim. I cannot control whether I have money in my pocket with simply my opinion. Third thing, no one's going to waste a bunch of time going downtown or anywhere and haggling over subjective views. Who does that? If I said I like Hyundais, you're not, well, how much time are you going to waste spending, well, you shouldn't like Hyundais? Okay, that's my opinion. You have your opinion, I have my opinion. Otherwise, just shut up, right? Last thing, objective claims are the very kinds of things we ought to be talking about with our friends and neighbors, our kids. Why? Because objective claims matter. If it was my opinion that NyQuil could cure my TB, I sure hope you would argue with me about this, because this is an objective claim, and you need to argue with those because those make a difference in how we live. Does that make sense? By the way, once you determine that something is objective rather than subjective, the only thing left to do is to determine if it's true or false. Because if it's subjective, it's always true. I just said it was true, and it's my opinion. If it's objective, the only thing left to do is to discover if it's true or false. Okay, that's it. No more training. Now we're going to go to the test. I'm going to take all claims and put them in two buckets. On one side, we're going to have all objective claims. On the other side, all subjective claims. Remember, objective claims are simply the claims that are true for all of us, whether you like it or not, because it's grounded in objects, not in personal subjects. Subjective claims are the things that are a matter of personal opinion because they are grounded in subjects. Okay, you ready? I'm going to give you a claim. You're just going to tell me what side it goes on, and we're going to see how far you get before we start to choke. We're going to start with the easiest kind of claims. The easiest kinds of truth claims are simply claims about physical objects. So I'll give you the claim. Here it is. Objective or subjective? Objective or subjective? Yeah, can my opinion change the color of my car? No. This is an objective claim we could actually go out and test. It's either true or false. We could go test it by going outside and looking at the car. This goes over here. This claim about a physical object, is it objective or subjective? Right. I mean, what do I even mean by best? Best in terms of keeping cool in the summer, best in terms of staying clean. What do I even mean by best? This goes over here. We're going to raise the level a little bit. The easiest kinds of claims are about physical objects. Now we're going to go up one level and just talk about concepts. Concepts. Are you ready? Here's the claim. Objective or subjective? Are we clear on this? Is it objective or subjective? Yeah, wouldn't it be great if all math facts were a matter of personal opinion? Right? Your checkbook would always be balanced. You'd always get 100% on every math test. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. It goes over there. Here's one about math. Objective or subjective? Now, some of you look at this and you hate math so much that you're thinking this is objectively false, right? Like this is how you feel about math. And some of you in this room actually like math. Raise your hand if you like math. Hi. These are the math geeks in the room. Keep your hand up high. There's another word for math geeks. You know what they're called? They're called employers, okay? Just so you know, they're the ones who start companies. This goes over here. I want to throw a wrench in this for you. Is this statement objective or subjective? Okay, remember, by the way, do you see how you don't even know the answer to this question, yet you can still determine if something is objective or subjective, even when you don't know if the claim is true? Clearly, can my opinion, if in my mind I said, in my opinion, I can do 1,000,000 consecutive push-ups, does that now mean I can do 1,000,000 consecutive push-ups? No. My opinion has no power on this, either does yours. It can't stop me from doing 100. It can't make me do 100. This is a tricky question because this is an objective claim about an object known as Jim. In other words, weirdly, the object under consideration happens to be a subject, but it's still an objective claim. Are we clear on this so far? This goes over here. Let's raise the bar a little bit. Now we're going to we talked about physical objects, claims about concepts. Now we're going to do claims about metaphysical claims. These are claims, large claims about the nature of reality. So here's one. Is this objective or subjective? You guys can do better than this. Objective or subjective? Now, can my opinion make God exist if he doesn't? Because I want it to be so? Could it keep God from existing if he does? No. Could this be a false claim? Absolutely. Without knowing if it's true or false, I know one thing. It's an objective claim about reality. It's grounded in the object known as God. This is the very kind of thing we ought to be talking about And all that's left to discover is it true or false? Let me give you a more nuanced metaphysical claim. Here's a more nuanced one. Is this objective or subjective? Objective or subjective? Whoa, geez, 3 people. Come on. Which is it? Can your opinion make Jesus the way if he isn't? This could be false. Perhaps Jesus didn't even live. But the claim is an objective claim about reality. This is the kind of thing you should be thinking about and be able to defend or argue against. These are the most important claims about the nature of reality. So whether we even know it's true or false, we'll discover that tomorrow. This goes over here. Now I'm going to give you the hardest, most difficult level of claim. The highest level, you tell me. It's not, we went to physical objects, we did concepts, we did metaphysical claims. Now I'm going to give you a claim in the most difficult category. Here it is. Objective or subjective. We're going to be talking now about moral truth claims. Objective or subjective? It's not like you're in church, you have to say Jesus. Right? But is this objective or subjective? Let me make it a little clearer. What if I supersized it? What if this is the claim? Objective or subjective? Does this make it harder or easier?
It's the same.
Easier? Why does it seem easier?
Because premarital sex seems so normal now in this world, but anyone who has sex with animals is just weird.
Oh, that's cool. That's a great way to put it. Yes, because it seems like sex, premarital sex is normalized. But this other thing is still not normal. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't really have an impact on whether it's objective or subjective. Okay, there's only a couple of ways it could be subjective. So it's either objective or subjective. To be subjective, it has to be one of 2 things. It might just be a matter of personal opinion. That's one way it could be subjective. But there's a problem with that, right? Because if you said sex with 10-year-olds is okay, and you said, no, it's not, I could not adjudicate between the 2 of you. If all moral truth is grounded in personal opinion, then you're right and you're right. Everyone's right, because I'm not going to say you're less of a person than he is. So therefore, if this is a truth that is grounded in personal opinion, then I cannot tell anyone they're wrong. You might say, well, no, we don't do it that way. Well, we think it's as a culture, we have decided as a group that that is wrong. That's the other way it could be subjective, if it's a matter of cultural consensus. But that's still subjective. It's just a group of subjects. Make sense? But that means if there's a country like ours that says you shouldn't sleep with 10-year-olds, there's another country that says you should enslave and sleep with 10-year-olds, we're right and they're right, because all moral truths come from groups. By the way, this is exactly what the Nazi regime did in Nuremberg, right? After World War II, they rounded up all the war criminals and they said, hey, we're going to be trying you for the war crimes, mostly in concentration camps in World War II. But those folks who were actually being tried said, you can't try us for these crimes. In our culture, we were promoted for this behavior. We worked our whole lives in this regime. We were promoted every time we did it. This was actually seen as a good thing. I get it, you don't like it, but just because you won the war does not mean now you can come and tell us it was wrong. For us and for the people who controlled us, it was right. Now, there were 3 justices, 3 judges who worked in that tribunal. One was Russian, one was English, one was American. The American was named Jackson. He later became a Supreme Court justice. And Jackson basically looked and said, no. You're still guilty because there's a law above the law. In other words, this moral claims are not subjective. They're not based on what cultures even think. They are above that. They transcend that because they are grounded in the objects known as the behaviors themselves. Now, I'm not saying that this is true or false, but it is objective. The only thing left to discover is it true or false? These are not a matter of personal opinion because they can't be grounded in the only 2 ways you could ground personal opinions. We have to get this right, folks. This difference is key in teaching our young people and teaching ourselves. Do you realize the language in our country is making a mess of this? I'm going to play a video, so get ready. There's going to be audio in the back. I'm going to play a video here from the computer, so get ready. Here it comes. And I want you to hear, this is Oprah Winfrey at the Golden Globes last year when she was talking about the Me Too movement, how proud she was that certain people had come out and shared what was happening in their lives. But I want you to listen to her words to see why her words don't work. Here's what she said. Get ready. Here we go. If you have no sound, don't worry. I'll back it up. We'll do it again. If I have to, I'll just speak it for her.
What I know for sure is that speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have. And I'm especially proud and inspired by all the women who have felt strong enough and empowered enough to speak up and share their personal stories.
Do you see what she just said? And do you see why it doesn't work? She said that these people were speaking their truth, your truth, she said. She used this expression, your truth, as if that was just the truth of these women who had been victimized. Really, is that what it is? It's just their truth? Okay, tell you what. We're in a larger group. We are the movie producers who have been working in this industry for 80 years. We outnumber you actresses, and our truth is if you want a job with our job, if you want to get a part in our movie, you will sleep with us, and we outnumber you. And sorry, that's the way it's always been. If you don't like it, that's our truth. And if all moral truth is simply grounded in opinions of groups, we're at a standstill. If this really is behavior we don't tolerate, it's because it's objectively wrong. It's not their truth versus their truth. It is the truth about this behavior. Do you see the difference? We have to start using our language carefully because there's no such thing as your truth unless we're just talking about your preference for cookies. This kind of stuff is moral truth. This is objective, not subjective. And that's a subjective expression, their truth. Wrong word to use. Now, I will just tell you right now, if you think about the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth, pretty much the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth on all of these key issues has been opposed by our culture. Whatever view the culture has on these key issues, you will not find that view affirmed in Scripture. Let me tell you what, I work with a lot of young students. Most of my audiences are like high school and college. We were just at Boise State about 2 weeks ago. Here's how I see young Christians try to get around the fact that Scripture seems to disagree with what culture is teaching on these key issues, these key moral issues. They will say something like, well, you know, Jesus never said anything really about those issues in Scripture. For the most part, he's silent about those issues. Tell me where he says anything about homosexuality, for example. Really? So that you think that's how you're going to get out from under this teaching of Jesus? You realize that Jesus didn't say anything about these issues either, yet you don't think these are okay to do. Sometimes Jesus didn't say about stuff about the stuff that was absolutely stupidly self-evident. And by the way, Jesus actually did say a bunch about all of those topics. Do you know what he said about those topics? I'll show it to you from Matthew 5. Don't think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. In other words, he said, if you want to know what I think about those issues or what God says about those issues, read Moses and the prophets. I didn't come to erase that stuff. I came to fulfill that stuff. So Jesus had a lot to say about this. It was said through Moses and the prophets. And I'll tell you what, it's going to be tough for young people, I think. And Jesus was very clear about this. He said, I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not a small thing about the Old Testament law is to be removed. And anyone who sets aside the least of these laws, the least of these commands from Moses and the prophets will be least in the kingdom. So these big issues on sexuality and identity and marriage, those issues don't change. And if you set those aside, stand by to stand by. The second thing I see young people doing in trying to avoid the teaching of Jesus of Nazareth on moral issues is they will say, well, you know, the writers of the New Testament, that was 2,000 years ago. They weren't even aware of modern science and biology, of modern gender theory, whatever it may be. Had they been writing in 2019, it might have looked a lot different. Paul has no idea what marriage is going to look like in 2019. Have you ever heard that claim? I'm hearing it a lot in the church proper. This is about as stupid. Okay, look. Have you guys ever thought about this? If I had a timeline of biblical history, right? I started off with Genesis 1, and I ran it all the way down to Revelation, okay? Or forget about the book of Acts, because we're not at Revelation yet. So, book of Acts. If I took that timeline and I looked at all the places where miracles occur, you realize they're not evenly dispersed, right? Miracles don't occur every 5 years. We get another miracle from God, all the way through all the Old Testament, all the way to the New Testament. It doesn't happen that way. As a matter of fact, all the miracles in Scripture are bunched up around 4 guys, okay? Moses, Elijah, Elisha, and Jesus. That's it. And probably 85% of these miracles are bunched up around 2 guys, Moses and Jesus. Why would that be the case? Why would God bunch up all these miracles around these 2 key figures? I'll tell you why. Because the miracles are what authenticated their message. Why should you listen to Moses? Why should you listen to Jesus? Because I demonstrated who they are by working miracles through them. And Peter said, this is what Peter said in the first sermon ever preached. He said, hey, men of Israel, listen to these words. Jesus the Nazarene, a man attested to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs. Why should you care about Jesus? Because like Moses, he's been authenticated through the miracles. So if you're telling me, look, you know, there's some new revelation we should think about because times have changed, really? If there was something new that God wanted to say to you, he would send you someone to say it. And he would authenticate that dude with miracles. So tell me, who is that now? Who is that who's come in the last couple of years who's got a new message on sexuality authenticated by miracles? Oh, you don't have one of those? Exactly. And until you show me that guy, I'm going back to the last guy who was authenticated by miracles. That dude is Jesus of Nazareth. You're stuck with that guy. But why would anyone in this room be surprised that if you follow the teaching of Jesus, you're going to have trouble? Why does that surprise any of us? Shouldn't we expect that? You know, when Jesus saw the crowd, he went up on the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And so he opened his mouth and he began to teach them. And he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the gentle," right? "For they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who seek, they hunger and thirst for righteousness," right? Because they'll be satisfied. He said, "Blessed are those who are merciful, for they'll receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they'll see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, they'll be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Then he said, "Blessed are you when people, not if, when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." That stinks. Run for the hills. No, he didn't say that. He said, "Rejoice and be glad. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." In other words, if you will simply adopt the view of Jesus, get ready. You will be insulted. You will be persecuted. Why? Why would that be just like the prophets? Because you'll be speaking the words of God unto a fallen world of humans. And anytime we do that, speak the words of God to fallen humans, get ready. So I just want us to know before we start, right, that most of us will say to young people, and they'll tell me, "Oh, I'm a Jesus follower." Really? Are you really? Or are you just a Jesus admirer? Or worse yet, are you kind of a Jesus modifier? You take the words of Jesus out of context and try to make them work for you. Or are you a Jesus redactor where you just say, "Well, he didn't talk about that," or "I'll take that line out. I like all the teaching of Jesus except for that verse. Take that one out." If you want to be a Jesus follower, then you know you're going to suffer. Because your views will not be popular on moral issues. Not going to say any more about that, but I want us to at least see the difference. So before we take a break, I want to just tell you three ways that the culture lies to us about truth. Here's the first one. Well, there is no objective truth. There's no objective truth. Everything's a matter of perspective, perspectival truth. It's different. For example, they'll look at teachings like this statement from Einstein. Truth is what stands the test of experience. Do you think that Einstein didn't believe in objective truth about the universe? Of course he did. But they'll say, well, look, he's a subjectivist. He says it stands the test of his experience. My experience is different than your experience. Therefore, my truth is different than your truth. That is not what Einstein meant by that. Or this penultimate statement of subjectivism. Believe nothing just because a so-called wise person said it. Believe nothing just because a belief is generally held. Believe nothing just because it's said in some ancient book like your stupid Bible. Believe nothing just because it's said to be of divine origin like your stupid Bible. Believe nothing just because someone else believes it. Believe only what you yourself test and judge to be true. Now that is a statement of subjective truth. You know who said this? Buddha said this. And how do we know that Buddha said this? Because it's in an ancient book of allegedly divine origin believed by millions of people. Okay, do you see the problem? In other words, if you want me to believe this, you just told me 5 reasons not to believe it. It doesn't qualify based on your description of what qualifies. This is a self-refuting truth claim. It kills itself. It's called a suicide claim. In other words, this claim that there is no objective truth. If someone says that to you, what's the first thing you're going to say? Is that objectively true? Because if that's objectively true, there's at least one objective truth, that there is no objective truth, which means there is objective truth. Do you see the problem with this claim? It's self-refuting. Start looking for these folks because they're in culture constantly. You will start to see them on the news every single night. Here's another lie told about truth. Well, even if there is well, by the way, these are my favorite self-refuting claims. Is that an awesome claim right there? Do you see why it's self-refuting? This one's kind of like it. Right? These are claims that basically shoot themselves in the face, okay? Let me give it to you this way. Here's the second lie that's told about truth. Well, even if there is objective truth, you can't really know it for sure because we have a limited capacity to understand truth. So even if there are objective truth claims, truth cannot be known. I hear this constantly because it feels more modest. It's kind of like this. A lot of atheists will say it this way: believe those who are seeking the truth, but doubt those who say they found it. See the problem here? Molly Ivins has the best way of saying it. She says it this way. She says, I believe that ignorance is the root of all evil and that no one knows the truth. Do you see the problem? If no one knows the truth, she's also someone who doesn't know the truth, but she seems to be acting like she knows the truth. Look, this is another self-refuting claim. If someone said to you, the truth can't be known, what's the first question you're going to ask? Do you know if that's true? Because it sounds like you know that truth can't be known, but if truth can't be known, you can't know that truth can't be known. This is another self-refuting claim. It's a claim about truth that happens to be false. Like this one. This is kind of self-refuting, don't you think? Death Valley Health Center. And this is my favorite of all self-refuting billboards. This might take you a second to get it, but just take a look at it. Here it is, my favorite. Right? Some of you will get this tomorrow. Ask the person sitting next to you. They'll explain it to you, okay? It's kind of like you're on the wrong side of the saw cutting off that branch, all right? I'll give you the third lie about truth. It's this definition of tolerance that we've embraced as a culture, which is not true. This idea of tolerance that says all of our views are equally valuable, equally meritorious. We have the same merit. In other words, in order to tolerate me, you must at least agree that my view is equal to your own. That's self-refuting. Can you see it? Because if I came in and said, you know what, I don't agree with that. I think some views are bad, some views are good, some views are dangerous. I don't think every view has got equal value. Can you accept my view? Well, no, because her view is, or his view is, that all views are equal. But then you got to accept my view, which is all views aren't equal. Well, I can't accept that view, but you have to because your view says that all views are equal. Do you see how you can't live this? This is self-refuting. And the reason why it's self-refuting is because it's a distortion of what true tolerance is. Here's the definition of tolerance. Believe it or not, it's still in the dictionaries today, even online. A fair, objective, and permissive attitude towards those whose opinions, practices, religion, nationality, race differ from one's own. I'm going to give it to you the easy way. There are 3 D's that are required for tolerance. The first is a disagreement. If you think you have to agree with me in order to... Look, you don't tolerate people with whom you agree. You agree with them. Does that make sense? In order to tolerate, that begins when we disagree. So the first thing you're going to need to be tolerant is a disagreement. Do not abandon your disagreement. 2, there has to be a difference in our 2 positions. Don't think we have to agree and come to the same position on this. We can hold on to our differences. You have to have a difference in order for tolerance to emerge. You can't have tolerance without a difference and without a disagreement. 3rd, don't be a jerk. It's about demeanor. What I mean here is this. I'm going to give you permission tonight. You have it. I'm sure that Eugene would agree with me. I'll give you permission to hate. Because Jesus hated. God hates. He hates sin. You have permission to hate dangerous, evil, bad ideas. What you don't have is permission to hate the people who hold them. You're called to love those people. But there are dangerous ideas that you ought to hate. We don't agree these things are not bad in order to be tolerant. Can I do this? We're going to stop right there. Take a 10-minute break. 10-minute break. We talked about the nature of truth. And why this is so important is because we're about to talk about whether or not God truly exists. And we can't even begin to do that if there is no objective truth to begin with. Take a 10-minute break. We'll come back here and we'll talk about the evidence for God's existence. Okay. We're going to try to stay tight to our schedule because I want to give you a chance to ask questions at the end. Okay, does that sound good? And only easy. As a matter of fact, sometimes questions are hard, so maybe tonight we'll just have all Q and no A. Does that sound good? Just all, it's easier for me. All Q, no A. Now, some of you have asked me in the break, hey, this is hard stuff. Would you agree? I mean, it's like there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to go through. When I started doing this, I hate selling books, just so you know. I hate selling books. But it turns out that some of the deepest ways we can get into content is by writing books. So I can say what I can with you guys tonight, but in the end, you can only blow this out into 48,000 words in a book. Although it probably feels like you're listening to 48,000 words, right? So I know this can be hard, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to send to you, I'm going to give you a way to get everything we talk about tonight in video form, and everything we talk about tomorrow in video form. So yes, I'm happy to sign books, but just know I'm going to give you a text message. You can call, you can text, and you'll get all of this stuff downloadable for free. Because I want you to be able to go deeper, and I know it's hard to do all in one. It feels like we're drinking water out of a fire hose. So I get that. Okay, that's great. So what we're going to talk about now is some material I wrote about in a book called God's Crime Scene, which I know is a confusing title, but I'll explain to you why I did it. But first, I'm going to walk you through a different book. Now it's time to do some detective stuff. I didn't become a Christian until I was 35, and I had to really examine why I believed there was a God. Why should I believe there's a God to begin with? If there's no God, there's no Christian God. If there's no objective truth, then there's no objective truth about God. So we start with truth. Now this claim God exists is either true or false. Now we got to examine that. If God exists, then the question is Christianity true? Because if there's no God, there's no Christian God. We're building it in pieces. Make sense? The next question is, does God exist? We're going to use this book, though, to examine that question. This is the Fundamentals of Criminal Investigation. We're going to do a little bit of what I call Death Investigations 101. I'm going to take you to a death scene, and we're going to show you how working a death scene can help you examine whether or not God exists. Okay? So the first thing I got to show you is a dead body. So here's our dead body. Yes, he looks suspiciously like my son Jimmy, doesn't he? Do you guys have Trader Joe's here in Tennessee? No? Yes? We love Trader Joe's in California, okay? He used to work at Trader Joe's. I had him get on the floor there before he got out of the police academy so I could take this picture. Now, not every death scene is a crime scene because there are 4 ways to die. Only one of them is criminal. What we're trying to discover at every death scene is, should we investigate it further as a crime? So how do we tell if it's a crime scene when we only have a death? Well, we examine two lists that begin with the letter E. The first list is a list of evidences. What we have so far right here, the only evidence we have is a dead guy laying face down. That's not much. But we can make a list. We'll put that on one side, the list of evidences. And on the other side, we'll put a list of explanations. And we'll include every possibility, even though I don't care about what's possible. I only care about what's reasonable. The standard of proof is not beyond a possible doubt, because you'd never convict anybody. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a lower standard. I've never worked a case in which I could answer every possible question. And I only select jurors who are comfortable rendering verdicts, even though you'll have open questions. If you think you have to have every question answered before you can believe anything, what are you, stupid? You don't have anything you think you know with certainty that I couldn't level a possible question at. You believe things beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond a possible doubt. Look, you can get in your car tomorrow, turn the key. It's very quite possible. Every day in America, someone turns a key in their car and it explodes in their face. Yet you're going to turn the key in your car tomorrow. Why? Because you're not operating at beyond a possible doubt. You're operating at beyond a reasonable doubt. You'd be frozen in place with terror if you thought you had to have every question answered before you could do anything. Same is true with your beliefs about God. There are some questions I cannot answer. The question is, do I have enough evidence to get me beyond a reasonable doubt? That's what we're trying to do here. Make sense? Okay, let's hop in it. So far, the only evidence we have in this room is a dead guy laying face down. Now, how do we explain dead guys laying face down? There are 4 ways to explain them. The first is he might have died by some natural cause. He might have died by way of some accident. He might have actually committed suicide, or he may have been killed by somebody else. These are the 4 ways that people die. Now, given what I have here so far, a dead guy laying face down, can I cross out any of these possible explanations as unreasonable? Which ones can I cross out? Go ahead, just yell them out. Suicide, well, if he intentionally took too many pills, he would look like this, wouldn't he? Heck, if he accidentally took too many pills, he would look like this. If he was killed by somebody who gave him too many pills, he would look like this. If he just died of a heart attack, he would look like... Do you see how right now I can't cross out anything? They're all not only possible, they're equally reasonable. So let's change our scenario. What if he's a dead guy, he's laying face down, but now he's in a pool of his own blood, center torso. It's not around his head, it's around his center torso. So we're going to add that to our list of evidences. Now, at that addition to our list, can I cross out anything? Yeah, look, it's not coming out of his mouth or his nose. It's not around his head. It's around his center torso. Now, is it possible he's bleeding out of some place? I mean, anything's possible, but it's not reasonable, right? Where are you going to bleed from center torso? I mean, I think I can cross out natural. I don't know how that could be naturally happening. But can I cross out anything else? Not until I roll him over, right, and see what the injury is. Let's go back to our scenario. What if it's a dead guy laying face down in a pool of his own blood? But now, we see he's also got a single gunshot wound to his center torso. The pistol is laying by his side, and the gunshot wound is an exit wound coming out of his back. Let's put that on our list. What can I cross out now? Well, if he thought he was handling a gun that was unloaded, and it turns out to be loaded, couldn't he have accidentally shot? That's an exit wound, single gunshot. I think this could still be an accidental. It could be a suicide. It could be a homicide. Can't cross out anything yet. Let's change our scenario. What if lying next to his body, written in his own handwriting, on a piece of paper that we find elsewhere in the room, we have a suicide note. It's only got his fingerprints on it. Only got his DNA skin cell transfer. That would change things. Let's add that to our list. Can I cross out anything? Yeah, I think he may have accidentally killed himself before, maybe he intended to kill himself, but maybe he did it too early, but I think I can cross this out. Now, are you committed? This is a suicide, right? What?
Somebody could have, you're the one who DVRs all the datelines. You told me that. You told me that you DVR'd the datelines in the 48 hours, right? Yes, okay, I'm gonna, that's just, okay. There's a suicide note, and it's written in his own handwriting. There's no other DNA on there's no fingerprints of anybody else on the note. So how did that happen? What? Duress. I thought she said a dress, like he's got a dress on. Duress, yes. Somebody forced, because you guys are watching Criminal Minds, right? That's what you guys, that must be popular in this state. Do you guys watch Criminal Minds too? Okay, that's a stupid show, okay, just so you know. No, I'm serious. That is just stop watching that show. That's a stupid show. My daughter was watching that for about a year, and I'm thinking it's like, like Monk. I had no idea what it was, right? And then I see what she's watching. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's not only is it a stupid show, it's ridiculously over-the-top, gory, stupid show. I mean, all right, let's make this a little simpler. I will change the scenario and see if we can get you to convince you. Here we go. What if now he's lying on his ground, in his own blood, gunshot wound, a note by his side, but when we examine the note, it's not on paper we find elsewhere. And it's not his handwriting. And it's see, she says, see. And I'm making this up, okay, for crying out loud, see. Like she's making it up. Okay, and it's got unknown fingerprints. Not only that, what if, just to make it more interesting, what if he's got multiple gunshot wounds, but now they're all entry wounds on his back? That would change things. What if there was bloody footprints leading out of the room? Let's make that happen. Here we go. You can see this is a California murder. Can you see it's a California murder? California murder right there. There's a beach out there somewhere. That's the surfing killer. Let's add this to our list. Those are entry wounds now. Okay, can you see how by adding this to the list, this is now clearly not a suicide? Kind of hard to shoot yourself multiple times in the back and then walk out of the room in your own blood. Would you agree? That's kind of tough to do. Is it possible? I always say yes to that question. Who cares? It's not reasonable. That's my only standard. Now, what we did here is something we call abductive reasoning, also called reasoning or inferring to the most reasonable explanation. It's a form of logical processing. But I'm going to give it to you a simpler way. I teach this to homicide investigators all the time. To determine if a death scene is a crime scene, simply ask yourself this question. Can I explain everything that's in the room by staying in the room? If you can explain everything that's in the room by staying in the room, it's not a murder. I'll show it to you. Let's make it visual. Let's make the room a box. We'll put them in a box. We'll play this game of inside or outside the room. So what we're going to ask is the question, if I can stay inside the room to explain everything I find inside the room, for example, if I find that note is written on a piece of paper that he has elsewhere in the room and it's his handwriting and it's only his DNA and fingerprints on the note, well then I can stay inside the room for an explanation. He's inside the room, he's the cause of the note. If, for example, I talk to people and they say, yeah, that's his gun, it's registered to him, he keeps it in a safe in the corner of the room, I can even explain the gun now by staying inside the room for an explanation. And anyone can shoot themselves once without any help from anybody else from outside the room. He could do all of this, he could accomplish all of it by himself as the only cause from inside the room. If that's the case, it's going to be one of these three. It won't be a natural in this case. It'd be the other two. But let's change the scenario. What if the best explanations are outside there? So in other words, what if that paper is not his paper, it's not his pen, it's not his handwriting, it's not his fingerprints on the paper? I got to go figure out who wrote that, who does not live there. Also, if somebody said, oh yeah, he's afraid of guns, he would never own a gun, he'd never touch a gun, as a matter of fact, and sure enough, it's not registered to him, and it doesn't have any skin cell transfer on it, I gotta go figure out now whose gun is that. And it's hard to shoot yourself multiple times in the back without some help. Finally, I've got bloody footprints that lead outside the room. Clearly the best explanation is a cause that's outside the room. Do you see how if all of the explanations, the best explanations for the stuff in the room is a cause outside the room, everything shifts
Why? Because we now have evidence of an intruder. These are simply intruder investigations. Why does this matter? Well, because intruders are the very thing that turn death scenes into crime scenes. They are. And you might have some sense of curiosity about, why somebody would kill themselves or how they could die accidentally. But once you know you've got an intruder, your sense of curiosity needs to shift into a sense of urgency. Why? Because the only show on TV that gets this is a show, this is probably the only show you guys should watch. It's called The First 48. Have you ever seen it? It's boring. I think it's boring. It's just a camera going around. You think it's boring too, right? Which is why no one... Oh, you like it because you DVR everything. If it's ID channel, I'm sure you're watching it. I get it. Now, why is this all important? Because I thought, okay, I was somebody who was a very committed atheist. I wasn't just the kind of atheist who didn't have an idea why you guys were crazy. I knew why you guys were crazy. And if you want to have a conversation with me about this, I'm happy to spank you for your silly ideas. I was very happy. I would find myself in those conversations constantly. But I knew if I was going to take a step in this direction, there was something I had to cover, and that is, why would I believe God exists at all? Couldn't I use this approach to discover if God exists? Here's what I mean. What if the room we are considering is not a room where there's a dead body, but it is the entire natural universe? What I mean is, the only stuff in this room is space, time, matter acted upon by physics and chemistry. That's it. Space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. Whatever I find in that room, if I'm going to explain it by staying inside the room, I have to only use space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. The only question is, can I explain everything that's in this room by staying in the room? I actually think there are 8 things about the room that have to be explained, or I don't care who you are. The first is, the room has a beginning. I don't know if you realize this or not, but the room has not been there eternally. We know from the science, Big Bang cosmology, that all space, time, and matter came into existence from nothing. From nothing. There was no spatial void before there was space. Space began to exist at the beginning of the universe, from Einstein to today. This is what science demonstrates. Really? So what was there before there was space? Nothing. That's what Aristotle says rocks think about. Nothing. So that means whatever causes all space, time, and matter to come into existence has to be non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material. Do you see how already we have to go outside the room to explain the existence of the room? Because the only thing you can use in the room is space, time, and matter. Also, the room appears to be incredibly fine-tuned for the appearance of biological organisms. This fine-tuning, this teleology of the universe is really not controversial. Even atheists believe that the universe appears to be fine-tuned, although they don't think it is. But they have to at least admit it appears to be. And life, it originates from non-life in this universe. We've been studying this for over 50 years. OOL studies, origin of life studies. We are no closer to an answer. The more we learn about biology, the further we get away from the answer. Not only that, when biology does appear in the universe, it appears to be designed for a purpose. Even Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist evolutionary biologist, says that all of biology is simply the study of things that appear to have been designed for a purpose. Of course, he doesn't think they were. He just thinks they just appear to be. Also, you're thinking about this right now with your mind. Really? Do you have a mind? You have a brain. An atheist will give you that. You have a brain. But under atheism, there are no immaterial realities. Brains exist, but immaterial minds cannot. How do you get from a material universe, a physical universe, how do you get something immaterial and non-physical like mind? And not only that, they would say that free agency is also an illusion because you cannot get free agency from material machines. Your brain is simply acting because something happened neurologically in your brain before. That synapse fired and caused the next synapse to fire. I mean, you have no control over your synapses. Those are like dominoes that fall. They're material things. This is why an atheist named Sam Harris, who's a neuroscientist, has written 2 books on this issue, denying both mind, it's an illusion, and free agency. He's consistent. He's trying, because you can't, how do you get these things from staying inside the room? How do you get mind from space, time, and matter? Also, we know there are objective moral truths that transcend all of this. Where are those grounded in? Where do those come from? What is the objective moral lawgiver that can explain objective moral truths? And we all agree there's evil in the world. What is the standard of righteousness we're using to define something as evil? Now look, I know we're covering a lot. I teach this class at Biola. It takes me 17 hours to teach these 8 things. I want to prove to you that God exists. I was thinking about locking those doors and keeping you in here for 17 hours to teach you these 8 things. But I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. Therefore, God exists. So if all of you are wondering if God existed, I just proved it, okay? I'm going to let you out of here in a few minutes, okay? So tonight, all we're going to do is talk about one of these things. And I'm going to send you the video that talks about the other 7, okay? So you can relax. 2 of these are simply cosmological. The people who talk about these are astrophysicists and cosmologists. 2 of these are biological. 2 are mental, and 2 are moral. So again, we're looking at this issue. Can you explain these by staying inside the room? If you can, there's no reason to infer an intruder. Or if it can only be explained by going outside the room, now we got a problem because we've got evidence of an intruder. Only this intruder spans the entire cosmos, which is why I wrote a book that's called God's Crime Scene. Not because I thought that God committed a crime. I think you could investigate the universe like a crime scene to see what the best first cause is. So what we're going to do is take this approach. We had a list of evidences, a list of explanations. We're going to flip it to the universe. We have a list of evidences. There's only 2 ways to explain these evidences. Stay inside the room using space, time, and matter, or jump outside the room and use an extra-natural, non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material cause. And all we're going to look at tonight is this one. I had a case a number of years ago. Guy was killed about 4 days before New Year's Eve. Shot in the head in his garage, where he worked as a car mechanic. When I got there, there was a phone line by his side that had this message from a woman named Rachel. And I looked at that and I said, man, what is that? I had never seen that shortcut, never seen that little abbreviated kind of a message. And I wondered, is that an accident? Did the phone accidentally make that happen when it was dropped? Is it a butt dial? Or is that really a message? A coded message from someone named Rachel. It turned out this is what solved the case, was this distinction. So I finally did a search warrant on all of this, all of her phone tolls back and forth. It turns out Rachel is my victim's wife. And she had been cheating on him for about a year. And she had told her boyfriend that she wanted him to kill her husband before the end of the year. And now we are 4 days before the end of the year because Knucklehead is a procrastinator. He doesn't take care of business. So he decides to go over 4 days before the end of the year to kill the husband. And as he's on his way to go to kill the husband texts his wife that he's going to come home early because it's between New Year's and Christmas. There's no business. I might as well just come home. And Rachel, being the conniving wife that she was, realized if I let him come home, this guy's going to miss another day. So she texted him this message, which in her language, because I did all her phone tolls, I could see what she had been saying for the last several months. She would text this often, but the number was different. She was basically saying, I will be there in 30 minutes. So he didn't leave. He waited for her to show up, and 15 minutes later, the boyfriend showed up and killed him. She simply wanted to hold him in place long enough for the boyfriend to kill him. And she did. So it turns out this is not an accident. This isn't caused by the phone. This is a message. It's information that Rachel is sending the victim. And that's what changed the whole case. That actually ordered our interviews. Our interviews are now done based on this information. Now, why is this important? It turns out the origin of life, that mystery about how non-organic matter becomes living biological creatures, is dictated by the same distinction. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. This is molecule known to mankind, the largest molecule known to mankind, called DNA. And in DNA, there are 4 nucleotides. Do you guys remember your biology from school? If not, I will refresh you quickly. These 4 nucleotides that are in the DNA strand are in a particular order. There's a 5th nucleotide in RNA. This order is not accidental. This order is actually information. It turns out that everything in your body, every micro machine, every part of your cell, your skin structure, is dictated by the information in your genome, in the DNA molecule. It's not an accident, and it's information. The same way that dial, phone dial, was not an accident. It wasn't a butt dial. It wasn't just a random string of numbers. It was a coded information sent to the victim. Now, why would that matter? Well, because think about it for a second. If that stuff in DNA is actually information, truly information, that changes everything. There's a guy named Stephen C. Meyer. He puts it this way. He's got a thick book called Signature in the Cell. I'll give you the money line from the book. There is not a single example anywhere in the history of science, in the history of the universe, in which information has ever come from anything other than intelligence. All you have to cook with in the box is space, time, and matter. But you can't get information from space, time, and matter. You can't get it from physics. You can't get it from chemistry. The only example we have anywhere in the history of the universe, information always comes from mind. Yet we have information in the genome. Where's that coming from? Now, I would have told you what I would have said as an atheist. I would have said, that's not really information. It might look like information, but I know you can't get information from physics and chemistry, therefore it's not information. Or I would say, if it is information, there must be a way to get it from physics and chemistry. That make sense? That's what I would have said. What I want to show you tonight is that there's no way to get this from inside the room. Now, I've written books, and I hope they're not boring, but this guy's book is boring. His name is Dr. Werner Gitt. He is an engineer from Germany, and his book on information theory is a hard read. So I'm going to throw it to you in a way you can catch it. Are you ready? How many of you in this room own a dog? Raise your hand if you own a dog. Are you dog lovers? Oh, you think you're a dog lover? You shouldn't have raised your hand, huh? Okay. How many of you here in this room think you have the best breed of dog ever? Like, in other words, if we made a list of all the dogs in the world, you think your dog would be on that list? Raise your hand if you think you have that kind of dog. Oh, how fast that hand went up. Okay, what do you have? A German Shepherd Lab. A what? A mix. Okay, good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Because, there's another word for mix. You know what that's called? A mutt, okay? You have a German Lab Shepherd. It's a mutt, okay? It's just a mutt. It's like a rescue dog. I like rescue dogs, but it's not on my list of the top 9 dogs. Mutt is nowhere on that list. To that dog. Okay, give me another dog that's better than that. Go.
Golden Retriever.
Okay. Oh, really? 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 So if you have to put an adjective like golden in front of it to make it important, it's a retriever. That's a nice dog. It's a nice dog, okay? But it's common, right? It's like golden retriever. It's like Labrador. It's like your favorite ice cream is vanilla. Okay, really? Okay, it's good. It's not on my top 9 though. You can do better than that. Give me a better dog than that. Come on. What? Okay, get an adjective. A collie's not good enough for a reason. Border collie is still not good enough. I'm sorry. Go. A what? If I can't say it in polite company, that's not on my list. I'm sorry, I can't. It's not. You have a second offering? You already gave me the other dog.
I have a second.
You have a second dog? Do you have 2 dogs?
No.
Do you? I'm not listening to you. What?
Okay, a husky.
A husky. Okay, look. It's like saying, okay, I hate to say this, okay, do you guys not know your English? Okay, husky is like the equivalent of like chubby. And that's like the equivalent of like overweight. Your dog is an overweight. Just say it. It's an overweight. It's a husky. Like, for example, you want boys' clothes. There used to be a husky section at Sears. Am I right? Am I the only one who remembers this? Truth. Go.
Bulldog.
A bulldog.
English bulldog.
Oh, in English. See, she knew it wasn't a good enough dog. Because right away she added, if you have to put a country in front of your dog, a whole nation to make your dog seem important, it's not an important dog. I'm sorry, go. Okay.
You put Great Pyrenees because you knew Pyrenees is not good enough to be on my list. Forget it. I'm going to tell you right now, I know it's not fair. It seems like you shouldn't do this because it's not fair. You can't rank them because every dog is somehow special in its own way. Wrong. Corgi. I don't say that. Corgi. Corgi is a beautiful dog. Corgi is the queen's dog. The queen doesn't waste time breeding your dog. The queen wastes time breeding my dog. Why? Because this is the royalty of dogs, okay? This is the kingdom of dogs right here. This is a corgi. This is my corgi named Bailey. Now, if I was going to make Bailey type out words to see how smart she was, because Bailey has no elbows, okay? She goes right from hip to paw, okay? That's just it. There's no elbows in a corgi. So if I was going to have her type out some kind of like message, and then I was going to write it on the wall, I'm not sure how good she could do, but I think we could determine how smart she is. So let's have her type her first message. Here it is. What do you think? That's pretty good, right? Now let me ask you a question. Is that information? Is it? You know, in a sense it is. What I mean is it's complex. But it's not specific. Like I can't understand what she's saying. But if I asked her, for example, to type a second line and she typed the exact same thing twice, you'd go, whoa. How do you do that, right? It's got some complexity to it. If I could do it 2 times in a row. If, for example, Bailey could type out a small repeating pattern like TT spacebar over and over again, you would say she is a smart dog. And if it was a little bit more complex repeating pattern, you would say, wow, smart dog. Are these 3 lines information? They are, in a sense. Again, complexity, a little bit more specificity, but still, if you ask the question, what am I saying here? Don't know. But it turns out you can get these 3 forms of information by staying inside the room with nothing more than space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. Sometimes this is called Shannon information, but the idea here is, for example, this first one you can get as a random, throw the chips on the floor wherever they lie. That's what it looks like. The second one can often be caused by physical attraction, magnetic attraction. For example, crystalline structures, when reduced to mathematics, are very complex repeating patterns, numerically. So there's a sense in which this could be achieved by staying in the room. This is the lowest level of information according to Dr. Werner Gitt. He calls this statistics. Not the way you think of statistics. This is his use for the term, okay? Now, if this is what DNA is, you can get this by staying in the room. Space, time, and matter is enough to get this. But this is not what DNA is. What if Bailey could be a little more specific in addition to being complex? And she could type this. Now, she clearly can type words. But I don't know what her meaning is yet because there's no specificity in terms of overall structure of the sentence. But now she understands words. She understands how to code. We now decode that codec, code and decode. We're able to do that now. This is another level of sophistication. Werner Gitt calls this cosyntax. We are now one level outside of what the room can do for you. You cannot get this from space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry. This requires a mind that can code and knows the code that we can decode. Do you see how we're now one level outside of the room and we are not yet at DNA? But we can't explain this level of information with just space, time, and matter. We're already out of the room. What if Bailey could type out a sentence that has meaning? She not only knows the individual word units, she can put them in the right sequence to convey language. Oh my gosh, this would be awesome, right? Now she's 2 levels outside of what the room can do for you. We are at what Werner Gitt calls semantics. Now there are people I know who are stuck between these 2. Right? They're learning how to speak English. They're like got some of the words down, but they don't always put them in the right order, or they don't know how to conjugate the verbs, right? You've seen that. I was at a restaurant with Susie in Malibu, California, a Thai food place. I go in the washroom, and this is the sign I saw in the washroom in Malibu, California. It was a sign that said, "Please do not throw paper wiping hand down a toilet." Right? I think I get it. Whatever paper you're using to wipe your hands, do not throw that down the toilet. But you can see this person's kind of stuck between a 2 and a 3, right? Like a 2.7. Got the right words, kind of got them in the right order, but not quite. What if Bailey could not only type words in word units, but also could put them in the proper order and make a sentence, and now she can make a request. Make a request. She just wants to eat. Okay. This is called pragmatics. We are now 3 levels outside what the room can do for you. Space, time, and matter cannot do this for you. We are not yet at DNA. And if what Bailey really wants is not to get fed, but she knows every time that they eat, the next thing that Grandpa does is take her for a walk. So what she wants is to knock over the domino that says eat, so she can get to the domino that says walk me. In other words, she expects you to meet her request so she can now do the next thing. That's a whole nother level of information that is known as apobetics. This is what DNA does. And we are now 4 levels outside the room. By the way, I know where apobetics can come from. We see minds do this all the time. So the most reasonable inference for me is mind. If you think you can get this with space, time, or matter, that burden of proof is on you, not on me. I know where to get information from. If you think, no, I can get it some other way, fine, show me. Take all the time you want, but you got to show me. This is the problem. Information comes from mind. Now, by the way, you can look at these 2 sentences from low-level information to high-level information, and you can determine the difference one of 2 ways. First, what is she saying? I don't know on the top. It's low-level information. It's very clear on the bottom. Also, on high-level information, if I just remove one character, change in meaning. Low-level information, remove the same character, no change in meaning. So, for example, I can remove one character here, and guess what? No change in meaning. It didn't mean anything before. It doesn't mean anything now. I think you know where I'm headed with this, right? This is why we say that commas save lives, okay? Because on the bottom, if I just take out the same character, the entire meaning of the sentence changes, right? If I take out that same character, the same comma, well, that sweet dog who wants to get fed is now evil Bailey who wants to eat Grandpa. And by the way, so you know, just so you know, that is Grandpa right there, okay? Just so you know. Now, let's turn the corner here and talk about Jesse James. So if this was his DNA chain, this is his informational chain, of course, it would go off in this direction for hundreds of miles or dozens of miles, and off in this direction for dozens of miles. It's the largest known molecule to humans. But let's just imagine it's this length for now. It turns out we can do what are called genetic therapies. My son David, who was an anesthesiologist, he was an undergraduate degree, he was doing biochemistry, and he was working on cysts in kidneys. And removing cysts in kidneys by simply changing the DNA sequence. So you can take one of these genomes, one of these nucleotides, like this one here, and you can take it out and change it. And if you do that, believe it or not, your DNA is so well programmed that there is some self-correction, but you can defeat it. And you can actually change the DNA structure. And when you do that, something about Jesse is going to change. His forehead height, his nose, his ear. Something will change structurally. Why? Because this information is specific, not just complex. And that's the problem. Everyone who looks at this says, how can that be so? This is a good example of apobetics and pragmatics. And this is why even agnostics like Paul Davies puts it this way. He says, we're still left with the mystery of where biological information comes from. If the normal laws of physics can't inject information, he's not a believer, but he knows that he can't get this from physics. And if we're ruling out miracles, which he does because he's not a believer, then how can life be predetermined and inevitable rather than a freak accident? How is it possible to generate both complexity and specificity? That's the problem. You need both of those in information. How do you do that in a law like men? We're always stuck with that basic paradox. So there's only a couple of ways to stay in the room to get genetic information. They've been examined for many years now by geneticists. One is to argue that it's accidental. No one believes that. But that's one way to get it, by staying in the room. It's an accidental sequence. The other is to say, well, there's some physical law that causes the nucleotides to line up in the genome that way.
These are the only two ways to get this by staying inside the natural universe. In other words, if we had our box again, the only ways to describe these in the room are with those two explanations. And by the way, they don't work for a number of reasons, but have you ever considered this? It turns out that every building block in your body is called a protein. Right? The Legos of biology are proteins. They are constructed from amino acids. They are constructed from amino acids in a little machine in your body called a ribosome. If there's no ribosome machine, you don't get amino acids constructed into proteins. But here's the problem. What's the ribosome machine made of? Proteins. You can't get the ribosome machine without proteins. You can't get the proteins without the ribosome machine. You have a chicken and egg problem. These do not solve easily by saying it's just random. And anytime you have a chicken and egg problem, it means you have somebody who's both the chicken and the egg at the same time. The second problem is if you think that you can get this from natural law, show me. There is absolutely no evidence of that. There's a third option. It might just be what we think it is, information, but that would force us outside the room because now we know we can't get it with space, time, and matter. We need mind. And by the way, when we do science, let me tell you the approach we take. We take this approach where we say, we want to ask the classic questions, right? You know the classic questions you ask when you write a paper? These questions, the what, where, why, when, how questions. If I just investigated a homicide and all I did was ask those questions, nobody would ever go to jail. You know why? Because I haven't asked the most important question. That question is a who question. Who did it? I can know everything there is to know about how it happened, when it happened, where it happened, why it happened, but until I ask who did it, no one goes to jail. Make sense? I'm looking for evidence of the who, not of the other things. Now, it turns out that in science today, and this is only in the last 150 years, we are not allowed to ask the who question. We can ask those questions, but they'll tell you there are no who's in science. Everything has to be a what. What caused this? Not who caused this. Who caused the universe to come in? No, what caused the universe to come into existence? You're not allowed to ask a who question. Really? Why not? Because we don't ask who questions. Yeah, but what if all the evidence, like the evidence and information, points to a who? Can I then ask a who question? No. No, wait a minute, that's silly. If I walked into a crime scene and I've got a wall next to the victim and it's got blood spatter on the wall, well, I get that. Physics can explain how blood, when it hits at a certain angle, spatters on the wall. But what if I walk into the same room and it's not blood spatter, but a message that says he deserved it written in his blood? Am I allowed to look for a who now? No. No, just physics. Really? If I have information on the wall, I can't look for a who? No. Look, I got information in the genome. Am I now allowed to ask for a who? No. That's just silly. Folks, if you're in here and you're interested in science and you want to go to school to be a scientist, I have one of those, okay? You can do that as a believer because all you're going to do is everything that they do plus one more question. That's it. And we've been doing that for years until the Enlightenment when we decided there was no who to ask about. That is a presupposition that stops science, doesn't help science. You can add, oh, by the way, I'm not going to run to a who when there's evidence it's a what. I will stay with what's. But when there's evidence it's a who, at least allow me to ask the who question. This is exactly what Getz says. He says, hey, a necessary requirement for generating meaningful information is a who. Somebody who has the ability to select alternatives, because that requires an intelligent, volitional being. Because unguided processes, I don't care how long you wait, they cannot do that, not in any amount of time, because this selection process demands continuous guidance by a being that can make decisions. So if there's a being outside the room that's intelligent and communicative, well, guess what? That might explain why we have information in the room. I want to leave time for us to be able to ask questions. So give me a second here as I come over and I'll try to wrap this up and give you some information. Two things. Why did I want to go through all this with you? I'll tell you why. When I was first examining Jesus of Nazareth, I had a problem with Jesus. Here's what I had. I thought, okay, the New Testament might be telling me something true about Jesus, but this stuff can't be true. Even if there was an historical Jesus, I did not believe that Jesus could do these things. This has got to be an exaggeration, a lie, because these things don't happen. Why I was committed to a very naturalistic worldview. I don't believe in supernatural things. I didn't believe in those kinds of things. I would have said, no, that can't happen. If it can't be explained with space, time, matter, physics, and chemistry, it doesn't happen. But then I started to look at the evidence for God. It turns out all of these things require something outside the room to act. And that thing outside the room has to be a certain kind of thing. An all-powerful, non-spatial, non-temporal, non-material first cause. An uncaused first cause. That means that thing is outside of space, time, and matter. That means it's extra-natural, because all we think about with nature is space, time, and matter. I need something supra-natural, something supernatural. And that's when it dawned on me, wait a minute. If there's something like this that caused everything in the universe to come into existence from nothing, oh my gosh, well, the most important and most unbelievable miracle in all of your scripture is not in the New Testament. It's Genesis 1. It's everything from nothing. If there's a being out there that could do that, all this stuff is small potato stuff, okay? He can do that. He did the other thing. And that's when suddenly this guy became available to me again. The miracles on the pages of the New Testament seemed less unreasonable. And before we go to Q&A, this is your time to come up. We have a couple of microphones here you can come up to and ask a question. So please start making your way over. I know it's hard to ask the first question, so we're going to skip it and go to the second question. Just come up here with the second question, okay? And we will ask questions. But while I'm telling you, we are here at this church because this church is doing something special. I just want to say something. Thank you for bringing me here. This is very unusual. I do these conferences around the country, but you'd be surprised at how many churches don't even think it's important. You know why that is? Because they really have no intention of going outside the room, outside this building. If I could answer every single question, if I could answer every call from my phone in the dispatch room as a police officer, if I never had to leave the building to answer every call for service, would I ever train? No. Would I ever study anything? No. I can handle every question from the phone. If you have no intention of deploying, there's no point in training. The reason why we're training with you tonight is because we want you to deploy. And there's a place to do this. If you share the gospel anywhere where you serve, someone's going to ask you a question about why you believe this is true. That's why we're doing this, so that you're ready to answer these questions. And this is a church that's not just saying, oh, this is a hypothetical, so in case you ever serve, no, there's actually an opportunity for you to serve here. Folks, seriously, it's easy to attend. I know Eugene's heart on this is not to entertain you every week. His heart is to prepare you every week to do something. And then we give you an opportunity to do it. If you haven't signed up to do it, that's a you problem. Fix that problem. Go do something. Serve, and you'll find yourself having to answer these questions to people who go, why are you here? Why are you doing this? Why do you believe that nonsense? Also, that's what this church has really been about this whole year, right? This whole series that, called Inside Out. What are we trying to do here? Well, we're trying to get out of the building. Look, in the end, there are so few churches that are committed to this approach that I want to commend you for being committed to this approach. But don't let this year go by. Don't be unchanged. Please don't be attenders. I know you're not, because you wouldn't be talking about this stuff if you were. But when your pastor gives you a chance to serve, it gives you a chance to act, do it. Now, questions coming up. I don't see anybody walking up here. Come on now, get up here. I will say it now. I'm going to go ahead and tell you how to get the videos that I promised you. I meant to tell you that last hour, so I'm going to do that right now. Please come up to ask your questions. We're going to start here in a second. And then if you don't ask them, you don't get them answered. So by the way, I always think Q&A is the best time. I think I learn more in Q&A because I can't script that. Okay, a couple places to get answers. Here they are. I have a website called coldcasechristianity.com. I post every day. We have a phone app, and on that phone app, you can actually ask me questions. So please use the phone app, download it, it's free. But tonight, for everything we do this weekend, if you miss something, here's how you're going to get it. If you're my age or older, find someone who's a teenager and ask them how to do this, okay? Because every time I do this, I get somebody who goes, what am I supposed to, I don't understand that. Well, you're going to text a message to me. Don't make fun of my number. I did not pick my number. It was assigned to me. You're going to text me at 66866. I didn't pick it. 66866, a single message, one word, detective. Just text that to me, and I will send you a link. You'll get all of it tonight. Don't watch it until after we're done tomorrow, okay? But you have to put it probably on your desktop or your laptop because these are large video files. I will send all of you that tonight. Okay, first question. Let's go.
A serious question and a fun question. So thank you so much. It's
Sure.
Great.
Sure.
So first question, in the world of your own reading and study, who are your top 3 go-to writers, thinkers that have helped you? Then just a fun question. There's a long history of mystery solving folks, Christian or otherwise. Father Brown, Lord Peter Wimsey. Do you have a favorite?
Okay, so top 3 guys to go to. Man, there's so many. It depends on the area. So tonight we talked about information theory. My top people to go to on this, there's a lot of people writing about this. Stephen C. Meyer is probably my top guy to go-to guy on this. We didn't talk about design and biology, so I'll give you a couple of names. Stephen C. Meyer's got several books out, Darwin's Doubt. He's got also Signature in the Cell. Those 2 I highly recommend. A guy named Michael Behe. He is a biochemist from Lehigh University. He's got a book out called Darwin's Black Box. It's 20 years old. Also, he's got a new book called Darwin Devolves, another great book. These are 2 books that really will help you from a biochemist perspective on why evolutionary theory requires a designer. Third person on this would be somebody named Fazal Rana, and he is at an organization called Reasons to Believe. He is a microbiologist, and he has written on this topic as well. So it depends on the topic we're talking about, right? So on those topics tonight, those are 3 go-to people. They're all scientists. So in the end, let me tell you what I try to do. I call up expert witnesses. I call up PhDs in jury trials. But in the end, I have to translate what PhDs say to a jury because most of us aren't PhDs. And I will not put a PhD on a jury. Just won't do it. So that means we need to be able to understand. If it's not something that we can grasp, there's a good chance it's not true. So I think we're all capable of grasping this stuff. So I may refer to a PhD, but in the end, what we're trying to do on the stage here tonight is to throw the ball in a way that people can catch it. And the other question was about detectives. Yeah, none. Detectives never, I don't know, am I the only one who feels that way? Are there any other cops in the room? How many times do we watch cop shows? Never. Do that for a living, don't care, and it's all stupid on TV, so actually not much. But now there are some good cops like Joseph Wambaugh who actually writes books from the perspective of cops. Those guys are always pretty good. So when cops write about cops, I usually am more interested. Okay, question from you.
As an anatomy professor in a
Yes.
secular environment, we just did DNA a couple weeks ago, or 10 days ago. But anyway, any other creative, I think I do it somewhat, but any other way that I can work that who question in?
Yeah, I think that it's always about analogies, right? We're making visual analogies. So when I talk to people about why we would want to consider this to be from something other than just physics, when I use the blood spatter example, I think people get it. There's a difference between blood spatter and messages written in blood. And all I would say to them, I would just say, we have to make a decision about what the best inference is. And I'll just leave it at that. You don't have to land. I think it's so obvious. And this is what really has helped a lot of people. There's a very famous atheist named Antony Flew, one of the most famous atheists of the 20th century. He was somebody who would attend meetings with C.S. Lewis. And he was probably, he called himself, and people used to call him the most notorious atheist of that century. And he became a deist at the end. He moved away from his atheism because of the DNA information. And it's not like you have to land it for people. I wouldn't even try to land it. I would just say, hey, but I think you're right. You probably are going to find yourself limited into what you can say. I never have to land it usually. Now here, I'm going to land it for you guys. But if I was doing it in a secular environment, I would simply say we have to decide how do we get this from space, time, and matter. When we know what that can do, how do we explain the 4 levels out? How do we explain this? And just leave it that way. I think most people will come to you and say, well, could you explain it with intelligence? People will come to you with an answer. So that's a good reason. That's a reasonable inference, I would say. Because it is a reasonable inference. I'm not saying you have to believe. By the way, do you realize that the case we made for God so far, did we use any scripture to do it? None. All of God's crime scene, no scripture. You can make a case for the existence of God with just science and philosophy. But is it the Christian God? Not really. I can make that case as a Muslim. That's what we're doing tomorrow, is about turning toward Christianity. So again, I can do this in a class, and this doesn't say anything about Christianity. This is just general theism. So I think you're in a better place, right? Because you're going to have a hard time mentioning how you get Jesus of Nazareth out of that, right? So, come on now. This is your time for a question. If you are too apprehensive about coming to a microphone, just raise your hand, yell it out, I'll repeat it. Go.
So people don't like to admit they're wrong.
Yeah.
What was your breaking point where you were willing to?
So people don't like to admit they're wrong. What was the breaking point where I was willing to admit that I was wrong? Boy, that's a good question. I mean, okay, first of all, there was no point. So, but I wonder what Susie would say about that. Like when, I never saw myself as, I'm one of those people who am willing to change my view with new information. And that doesn't mean I'm wrong. It just means I didn't have the information before. That's how I would have seen it. So I was just changing my view based on new information. That it wasn't new, but it was new to me. But I will tell you that there was no one point in which I said, oh, I'm a Christian now. I believe this is true. Because I'm a cumulative case guy. So if you look at how you might put together a cumulative case, right, that's what I showed you here with this illustration here. And we're going to talk more about this tomorrow with Christianity, is how do you find it, how do you infer that something is true? Well, a lot of that comes down to how many points of evidence, how many pieces of evidence point to the same reasonable inference. It's cumulative. So let me see if I can find it here. That's right here. So if you look at this real quick diagram, right? So it's not like there's any one thing that demonstrates to me that there is a God. It's that all 8 of these things are best explained by the existence of an all-powerful, non-temporal, non-material, non-spatial cause outside of the room. All of those are best explained. And by the way, if I have 8 pieces of evidence that point to you as the bad guy, and they're in 4, like 2 of them are forensic sciences, 2 are behavioral, 2 are witnesses who testify against you, 2 are forensic evidence. Well, now I got all kinds of different experts in 4 different fields who all say you're the guy. That's probably a good case. Here I have 4 different areas of expertise. These 2 are all cosmologists and astrophysicists. These 2 are all molecular biologists and microbiologists. These 2 are all neuroscientists and philosophers. These 2 are all ethicists. Completely different disciplines, all of which point to the same reasonable cause. That, to me, is a good cause. That's a good case. So when I got to that place, it was like slow. It took like 6 months. And I finally told Susie, I think this is a really reasonable inference. But I mean, you can ask her, for 6 months, this is all I talked about. All I did was work this one case. Every time I had any time at all, we had an extra spare bedroom, I would just be in there reading. And a lot of it was not just, it was everything in the first century that would tell me if this was true. So it was all of Scripture, all the non-canonicals, all the first century pagan writings, everything you could find in the first century to make that case, which we'll talk about tomorrow in a very brief way. Go.
So I've had many conversations with people that don't believe that God exists whatsoever. And this may be a little off topic, but my question to you, I've had people present the question, if there is a God and, you know, there's such great things about him, why do we have illness in like little children? And why do good people pass away for no apparent reason?
Yes.
How do you answer questions that are so sensitive?
Okay, great question. I think I have some images for that.
Are you surprised? Okay, so hang on. Let me just. That's a huge question. By the way, on college campuses, it's always some form of what's known philosophically as the problem of evil. Like, how do you address the problem of evil? And what it comes down to is, if there is an all-loving, all-powerful God who is both all-loving and all-powerful, why do we have evil of any nature in the world that occurs to any of us? Is he not powerful enough to stop it? Then stop calling him all-powerful. Does he not care to stop it? Then stop calling him all-loving. If he's all-powerful and all-loving, we should not have this stuff. So the question becomes then, well, how do I make a case? How can I make a case? Why would God ever be both all-loving and all-powerful and still allow this? Because that's really the question, right? Why would he still allow this? So let me show you what I typically say I'm going to give you one quick response that may help you. And why am I, let me just go back here. I didn't expect that question. I should have been ready for that. So I'm going to go this way. And I will get it. Okay. I'm going to offer it to you this way. Again, it's a cumulative case. And so I could say like 5 or 6 or 7 things about this, but I think one thing goes a long way toward helping understand broadly how to answer this problem on the problem of evil. So I'm just going to offer that to you. Forgive me for just talk awkwardly amongst yourselves for a second while I try to pull this up real quick. I'm almost there. Almost there. So when I teach this class at Biola, there are 350 image slides that I use to do this. Okay, so this is why it takes a little time to go through all these. Okay, so this is a good explanation here. So this is basically, let's see. Sorry. If you don't talk awkwardly amongst yourselves, I'll have to talk awkwardly in front of you. We don't want that, okay? So hang on, I'm almost there. And here it is. Oh, I get it there. Okay. Here we go. Ta-da! All right. I think part of the problem for me, and this is a problem that all of us have, that I want to share from you from an atheist perspective. So I was an atheist almost more than half my life so far. I have been a non-believer. And in my non-believing years, this was my view of what life is. And most of the people you're talking to, this is how they see life. They see life as a line segment. Dot, birth. 90 years, pain-free, die in your sleep with no pain at all at the age of 98, 99, 105, whatever it is. You get a lot of years. No pain, no suffering, no evil, no nothing, then you drop dead. And it's painless, and you call that a good life. That's really the view I had, and I expected this because I have a longevity in my family. I want, in my 90s, pain-free. Nothing goes wrong until you die. My grandpa Tony, basically, Italians live forever. He basically lived forever, it seemed like. Then he died in his sleep. I'm like, really? Who gets to do that? My family. I'm good to go. Now, if I'd have gotten sick with cancer and suffered for 10 years and then died, I'd have been pretty angry. Why? Because that's evil. That's suffering, that pain. I lost all of that stuff I was supposed to have. I expected to get 90, pain-free. I only got 40. Then I was in pain for 10 years. And then I died. That's evil. It turns out all evil is really measured and thought about in the context of what your expectations are and how long your life is. But what if I'm wrong about my concept of what existence is, what life is? What if life is not a line segment, point to point? But as you know your geometry, what if it's a ray? Starts at birth, extends through death, but then it continues off in that direction forever. What if that, this is, by the way, this is the view I hold as a Christian. That's a very different view. There are some of you in this room who have had to endure some terribly painful surgery at the age of 6 months to correct something, or 6 days, whatever it may have been. How many of you, just out of curiosity, had to endure some ridiculously painful surgery in the first year of life? Raise your hand. There's always people here who have had to endure that. And guess what? By the time you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you don't even remember it. It's like, hey, by the way, if I had stopped you in the first 6 days when you were having that surgery and said, how's life going for you? You just said, it's terrible. Why am I even here? Life is miserable. I'm in constant pain. But by the time you're 4 or 5, it's like you're over it. Why? Because you measure evil in the context of your life. But you've been measuring it against the line segment. And if the line segment's not true, if it's really a ray,
then every hour, every day, every year that you are on the other side of your temporal death, on the other side of the second dot, the more time you spend on that side of the ray, the smaller the actual temporal side seems. The more you extend in that direction, by comparison, the smaller and smaller and smaller your temporal life seems. Until finally, a million years into eternity, that first 90 years, I don't care if every minute of every day of every year for 90 years was terrible, it has to be measured in terms of what life is. Only as a Christian, I have a redefinition of what life is. Does that make sense? So I think, yes, evil is far more a problem for the atheist than it should be for the Christian. Because we ought to be able to see it here in terms of eternity. Now, I'll just tell you, I'm not going to go through all this. This is another 17-hour class. I think there are like 7 or 8 things that have to be considered. These are the things I have to consider when I've got a 10-year-old victim. We just 2 weeks ago solved a case from 1972. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. 11 years old, kidnapped on Thanksgiving Day, brutally attacked, killed, dropped off on the coast, 1 county north of us. That case was my dad's case. He picked it up as the IO, the investigating officer. He could not solve it. It stayed open. I picked it up in 2000. It happened in 1972. In 2000, I picked it up, did the DNA work on it. In 2003, it went cold again. But now we have ancestry DNA, so we solved it 2 weeks ago. That dude's been dead for 15 years. So we have a case that's been resolved. But no, that's it. Well, how do you explain to families, why did that happen to my 11-year-old? Do you have 2 hours? Because that's what it's going to take. But the first and most important thing, I think, is what is your definition of eternity? That definition should change everything. I hope that helps a little bit. Another question, just raise your hand, I'll repeat you. We have got a few more minutes, like 10 more minutes we can do this. Come on now. Go.
How do you find the original book that you're talking about for first century documents?
Okay, how do you find first century documents? So what you have to do is, okay, know what you're looking for. You're looking for church fathers. You're looking for the ante-Nicene, A-N-T-E, Nicene. That means these are the church fathers before the Council of Nicaea. So we're looking for the church fathers in the first 300 years. So why do those matter? I'll show you tomorrow. That's the first thing you're trying to look for, is who was listening to the eyewitnesses. The eyewitnesses wrote, but they also had students they taught. I want to know what those students said they said. You're also looking for non-Christian sources in the first, I'd say 100 years. After 100 years, I don't care. If you're out of the first century, I couldn't care less what people were saying about Christians, because if you want to lie about Jesus, what you do is you wait until everyone who knows the truth is dead. Then you can say anything you want. So once the original eyewitnesses are off the map, I don't care what you're saying, Christian or otherwise, because it's too late in history. So I'm looking for all Christians in the first century who were writing and non-Christians in the first century who are writing who happen to mention Jesus. And I'll be honest, we're in a great information age. So what you can do is one of two things. You can search online for these, and there are some reliable online sources, but also you can search online and find the reliable books you can purchase and read them from books. And I did both. Right? There was not really any good online. I got interested in Jesus probably 22 years ago. So what is that, 1996 or 7? So there wasn't a lot on, I didn't even think I had a computer that was online at that time. So I wasn't really doing a lot online. So I had to look for, believe it or not, in those days, there were these amazing things called bookstores. I'm not kidding. They were like buildings they sold books in. Is that crazy? Yes, there were those bookstores. And I went to bookstores. And I just purchased that stuff so I could be looking for those things. So you're also looking, though, I was looking for non-canonical gospels. So believe it or not, your 4 gospels, Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, are not the only gospels that were written about Jesus. Gospel of Judas, Philip, Mary. Gospel of Thomas. Infancy gospel of James. You can go on and on. By the way, I've written about every one of these on my website. But I wanted to read all of those so I could see, why do we believe these 4 but not those other 35? So these are all helpful. I'm writing a book right now that talks about non-canonicals because I actually think they make the case for Jesus. But they don't sound like Jesus if you read them. So you need to kind of read. So I read through all that stuff. And I bought those books on the non-canonicals. There are books you can buy that actually have all of the non-canonicals translated from original language. And most of the time they're not translated by Christians who are trying to make a case for Jesus. They're translated by skeptics. So that's good for us because you're going to probably get a better the translation, you cannot say it's been skewed toward you. It's been skewed against you. So, if that helps. Go.
Young people and challenges in this generation.
Yes.
I guess 2-part question. You taught at Summit, and what was your reaction in that environment?
Okay, so you're talking about young people and their reaction to Christianity, and have I taught at Summit? Yeah, I'm on faculty at Summit. I just finished year 7. So I've been there. We do 7 sessions a year, 160 to 180 students per session, 2-week sessions. If you have a high schooler, send your kids to Summit. It's in Colorado. It's in Manitou Springs, Colorado. It's just west of Colorado Springs. It's beautiful, but more importantly, I will just tell you parents who are here right now, you will have no more influence. No one will have any influence with any truth claim, with your kids or anyone else, until you marry relationships to claims. The most influential claims you'll make to anybody in your world are the claims in which you know something and you have a relationship with who you're talking to. So right now, these are 2 things that are very, very powerful. Young people are polled right now. Gen Z is polled, and you will find that Gen Z is polled, and they are the most distrusting of any age group. Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers. They're the most distrusting because they're surrounded by information that all looks equally authoritative. They're not sure what to believe. But if you can become an authority on a topic and you have a relationship with them, now you put the 2 things, that's the magic sauce. Part of the problem is they come to us, and by the way, people will come to us after these events. Lee Strobel, you had Abdu Murray here. They'll come to us after these events, and they will say, can I get a book for my 22-year-old? She's no longer a believer. Would you sign her a book? Yeah, I can sign a book for your 22-year-old. She's not going to read it. She asked you this question when she was 12 and 13 and 17. And she needed you to tell her the answer. I hate to say that, folks, but it's true. We do not need another $1 million apologist. We need $1 million $1 apologists. Every one of us has to become, as a parent, the best informed source of information on Christianity that your kids will ever ask. Oh, by the way, trust me, I'm watching the NFC West right now, and I'm trying to figure out, are the Rams or are the Seattle Seahawks the best team in that division? I can tell you why I think which one it is, and I can tell you probably the entire roster on defense and offense on both of those teams. I can tell you why I don't think that Cliff Kingsbury is going to get the Arizona Cardinals to do anything this year. And you all know it if you're football fans. What? Yeah, I can make a case comprehensively to my kids on the NFC West. So we all can make a case for something. Whatever we're passionate about, we can explain to our kids. The question is, are we passionate enough about this to be able to dive deep into this topic? Really? So God creates everything from nothing. So God is the uncaused first cause? Well, if God causes everything, who caused God? I get this question constantly. Have your kids ever asked you that question? They're thinking it. What's your answer to that question? They won't read my book to find that answer. You're going to have to read that book, or someone's book, and become the source of information for your kids, because it turns out that it's relationships plus answers. So if right now you have the relationship but no answer, no problem, get the answer. Then you'll have both, because if you don't have it, they will eventually get an answer from somebody with whom they have no relationship. That's what we don't want them to do. At Summit, what we do is we spend 2 weeks developing deep relationships with kids while we talk about Christian worldview. And we know that it's that relationship and the source of information that makes all the difference. So that's why I think it's so effective. We have 2 minutes for a very short question, then we're going to break for the night. And we're going to do it right on time, like you said. One last quick question. Ask, this is your chance. Go.
Say that again.
Like in the cop shows and everything.
Yes.
That are on TV, are the way that they solve the cases as easy or logical as they make them seem?
So in the cop shows, when they solve cases, are they as easy and logical as? So like a lot of my cases are on TV, right? And so we do like a 1 hour episode of a case. If you watch Dateline, these things loop through forever. So if you watch Dateline, you're going to see our cases. Even if you watch it this week or next week, you eventually we've done so many cases, they'll come back up. But I'll give you an example of this. So we did a case. It was a 2 hour episode. So it was a 2 hour episode. And the case started in 1979. Yeah. And we wrote, so I opened the case in 2003. I wrote the first search warrant, was written by my partner and I, in 2007. We took him to jail in 2009. We got him convicted, and this is all in the same episode, we got him convicted in 2014. So we spent from 2003 to 2014 to get that knucklehead convicted. All of that is in a 2 hour episode. So yes, except for the other 10 years and 360 days, it was exactly how we did it, okay? So yes, so they basically take it and they just give you the best stuff. Because, it's like to talk about law enforcement. Patrol, for example. Patrol they always talk about it. It's like hours and hours of complete boredom punctuated by minutes of sheer terror. And that's what it is, right? So, but if you're going to do a TV show on cops, it's going to be the few minutes of sheer terror. That's what you're going to put on. So they get the sequence right. They just don't get all the boring stuff right that you're doing. Because a lot of this stuff is just tedium. I've got one case, for example, from 1981. We have swabbed 34 guys. We have DNA at the crime scene, but it's only a partial marker. You can't put it in a database. So all we have to do is find somebody who matches the partial marker. Well, I have swabbed 34 guys in like 7 states. No hit. That case is still hanging around. We're still hanging around with it. But I'm like, that case will not be on TV because it's all boring still and no fun. If we get some fun involved, it'll be on TV, and I'll cut out all the boring. So, all right, that's it for tonight, right? Eugene, what we're going to do is tomorrow we're here at 9 o'clock. Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow we are going to talk about why you can trust your Bible describes the clearest and most reasonable view of God, and why the resurrection is reasonable. And then finally, I'm going to give you some tools so that you can share everything we just talked about with people in your world. If you've got someone who's young, who is starting to ask questions, I hope we make it visual enough that they can hang with us. So bring those people with you. It's been said by Bart Ehrman. Here's what he said, and it's true. Do you know this? We don't have a single original manuscript of any New Testament gospel. You want to know what the Constitution says? Go back. You can see on the corner archive, on the corner in Washington, D.C., there's a big archive building. You can go in there and see the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. You can see the originals. They are sitting right there for you to see. We don't have any such thing for the New Testament Gospels or any New Testament letter or book. We don't have the first copy of the original or a copy of the copy of the copy of the original. By the time we get any copy of any New Testament book, it is sometimes 300 years later. And when we compare the most ancient copies we have to one another, they don't match. They differ in thousands of places. Bart Ehrman, who writes about this as a New Testament scholar, says we have more variations between the ancient manuscripts than we have words in the New Testament. And he's right. If your students heard that for the first time in their Bible 101 class, which is what Bart teaches at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, do you think they would be impacted by that? Do you think they might have a seed of doubt? That is the claim. It's all over the internet. If you aren't paying attention to it, that's shame on you. Your students are paying attention to this. Now, we're going to answer that tomorrow, because even though that's true, it's meaningless. But unless we're able to show this and why it's meaningless, that can be a rhetorically powerful objection. That's the kind of stuff we're going to answer tomorrow.
So please come and bring people who have doubts, okay? And I'll see you guys tomorrow at 9 o'clock.